Welcome to episode 23 in this chess puzzle adventure series starring Bobby Fischerman, Average Joe, and Peter Potzer. Previously, the Caterpillar and the Magician had been battling it out in the semifinals, and ultimately the Caterpillar prevailed and advanced to the finals, where today he will face off against Bobby Fischerman. For this final match, Bobby Fischerman was randomly selected as the player to create the puzzles, and as a reminder, that means he has 3 chances to stump the Caterpillar. If the Caterpillar solves all 3 correctly, the Caterpillar will win the tournament. So here is the first position that Bobby presented to the Caterpillar. So here's position number 1. It's white to play and win the game. Black's pawn is moving down the board in this direction. Before I say anything else, if you would like to pause, how can white win this position? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, this is an interesting position because normally 3 pieces against 2 pieces with an extra pawn probably isn't going to be enough to win. If you imagine if these, knights get traded off, all you're left with is a bishop against a pawn. That's just going to be a draw. However, this position is very interesting in that after the move bishop to a6, it starts a sequence of events here that have to do with the placement of black's knights. Black's knights are not ideally placed, and you're going to see how that allows white to do some pretty neat things. So after bishop to a6, the knight is under attack. So where can this knight move to? Well, you can't go here, you can't go here, you can't go here, and you can't go here because of white's knights. So you can see that white's knight is controlling these squares and these squares. So that leaves really 2 options for the knight, either to here or to here. Now, if you played knight to a7, then bishop to f1 is going to happen and attack this knight. Now, if you look carefully, where can this knight go to? Well, you can't go here or here or here because look at these knights. They're controlling those squares. So if you want to save your knight, you have to go to e1, but that allows a very nice checkmate. If you would like to pause, how does white checkmate black? If you had a chance to do that, the move is knight to c3 check, king to d2, knight to e4 check, and if you look carefully, the bishop is cutting off these squares, the knight's controlling here, and this knight here, and the king here forces the king to go back, and then this knight can come in for the checkmate. Pretty nice stuff, right? So that's what happens going all the way back to the beginning here if black decides to go to a7. So a better option for black is to go to a3 with check to white's king. And now white plays king to b2, again attacking the knight. If you look carefully again, the knight doesn't have a lot of options. The only safe square is here because the king defends it. So knight to c2, and now if you would like to pause, how does white proceed? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is, again, bishop to f1. We've seen this idea before, attacking this knight over here on g2 because it doesn't have a lot of places that it can go. You can't go here, it gets captured. You can't go here, it gets captured. You can't go here. Even though it's defended 1 time, notice how white is attacking that square 2 times. So again, the only option for the knight is to go back here to e1. If you'd like to pause again, how can white proceed from here? Well, if you had a chance to do that, the move is knight to c3 check, and we're starting the same kind of maneuver that we saw before, forcing the king to go up, and then we're going to follow that up with knight to e4 check, which if you look carefully, forces the king to go back. And now it's a little bit tricky because last time we had actually a checkmate here. We don't have checkmate anymore because black's knight is controlling it, but we do have a nice move that we can play. If you'd like to pause, what should white play here? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is knight f to g3. And essentially what we're doing here is threatening checkmate a different way with the bishop on e2. Notice how black's king is trapped. The knight's controlling here, the king's controlling here. And if we bring the bishop in, it's game over. So black has to deal with that. And the only real way to do that is knight to d4 to control this square. And now we have mate in 3. Again, if you would like to pause, what's the finish? If you had a chance to look at that, it's bishop to e2 check, which forces black to capture it, which you might say, why are we giving up our bishop? Well, it's to set up the follow-up, knight to f2 check. The king moves up, and knight to f1 is actually checkmate. I don't think I've ever seen a checkmate like this before, so I hope you guys can appreciate just how funny this is, and yet it was also kind of forced there at the end. So pretty nice puzzle, but the Caterpillar solved it without any trouble, and Bobby was forced to go on to his second option, which we will look at now. So this position, it's white to play and win. White's pawn is going forward in this direction. If you would like to pause, how do you think white can win this position? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the first thing that we need to understand here is that if we just take the knight, it's not going to be good enough. And here's why. So normally, if you have a knight and a bishop at the end of the game against a lone king, you can win the game. However, when black recaptures here with the pawn, we have this problem that we have to deal with. If black pushes this and gets a queen, we're going to lose. We might lose as white, right? If we go here and allow this to happen, black's going to be able to get a queen here if we're not careful. So that's kind of the first problem. The other part about this is if we try to bring the knight in to, help stop this, let's just say knight to c5 check, there's always this move king to b4, forking our pieces. It's a king fork, but now we have to lose one of these. And if we lose either of these, black doesn't even care about this pawn anymore. It's just a draw, right? We can't win. So that's why we can't just get away with taking the free knight. The other thing is if we just take here, black simply takes, the knight is going to be enough to prevent us from checkmating, and we can't win. So what do we need to do? So the only winning move for white is the move a4, and we're trying to create a passed pawn here. And if black lets us, and let's just say, I don't know, moves the knight away somewhere, this pawn is going to become a problem for black. So for example, something like knight to a5 check, the king moves somewhere, knight to c6, and we're attacking the knight, but if black takes, we're going to take, and this guy is going to be gone. Our bishop's going to stop this pawn, and black can't really do anything. So just as an example of the risks if black decides to not capture the pawn, right? So black does need to take it. Now they have two ways that they can take this pawn. They can either take it immediately, or they can go knight to c3 check first and then take it. Now, this one is actually bad. Well, they're both bad, but this one is worse because you step into a pin. It makes our life very easy. We simply play knight to d6, and we're winning this knight for free now because it's pinned. You can't move. We simply take a next move. And we are going to be able to stop this pawn in time. Okay, so that's kind of the difference. So because of that, black says, okay, I won't take it right now. Let me go here first with the fork, and after we move, now I'll take it. Okay, and now it's a question of, okay, what do? We gave up our pawn. Why did we do that? See if you guys can figure out the reason. Well, if you had a chance to do that, it's because we wanted to set up an amazing little maneuver here with our knight, starting with the move knight to a5 check. And if you look carefully, the king is defending the knight on a4, so it can't really move away here, or we simply take the knight like this, right? So that's kind of the problem for black. So because of that, the only move for black is king to a3 to keep defending the knight. And now we can continue with our knight maneuver, knight to c4 check. And again, black's king is tied to the defense of the knight, otherwise they're losing the knight. So they have to go king to b3. And now we can continue with our knight checks, knight to d2. And again, black has the same issue, has to defend the knight, king to a3. Now, why did we do that? To keep going with our knight maneuver, knight to b1 check. Again, same issue for black. If they want to defend their knight, they have to play king to b3. And that allows us with a very nice finish. What do we play next? You had a chance to look at that. Is checkmate in one move. Bishop to e6 is checkmate. It's not a checkmate that you see very often. It's kind of a weird setup, but it is still checkmate nonetheless. And these pieces are actually preventing black's king from escaping this direction. So that was kind of the point. We jumped our knight around. And of course, black could have played a different move. But if that ever happens, we simply take the knight. And this is also going to be a win. Black's not going to be able to get a queen with this pawn. And we can, checkmate with the knight and the bishop. It's not easy, but it is a win for white. I have a separate video on the channel where I teach knight and a bishop and a king against a lone king, if you would like to watch that. All right, so the caterpillar also solved this puzzle correctly, and Bobby Fischerman had to think long and hard to try to stump him on the final puzzle. And for the very final puzzle, he decided to use this one. So this position, it's white to play and save the game, so get a draw, not lose. These pawns are going forward. White to play. What do you think white should play? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, this is a very interesting position because white has two pawns that are kind of close to becoming queens. They both are 2 squares away. The problem is, well, there's 2 problems. Number one, black has a rook, which is going to be very good at stopping one of the pawns. But also, there's a little idea going on here with the knight and the rook. You probably noticed that there's a discovered check if this knight moves somewhere, right? Well, we're going to talk about that in just a second. So The wrong move. The wrong move is a7. And we're going to come back to why this is the wrong move. So kind of had a 50% chance, right? Um, G7 is correct. A7 is not. Let's look at why this is the wrong move, and then we'll come back and talk about why G7 is the correct move. So if you play A7, first of all, if black just says, okay, I have to go stop the pawn, I'm going to come behind it. Well, now you're going to win if you're white because you play G7, and black has 2 pawns, and they can only deal with one of them. Let's say they take this one, now you get a queen. They're going to probably win. The other thing, if black decides to stop this one, well, then this one becomes a queen. There's no way that black can stop both of them at the same time. Okay, so that's kind of the first point. However, instead of going here, black has this really clever idea, knight to e4 check. And what they are doing is, number one, getting ready to use this knight to potentially stop this pawn. Like if you didn't take it for some reason, that could be an option for black. Like for example, let's say you just move your king down here. Now you can go over here, stop this one with this. And if you try to push this one, black can use the knight to stop that one. And they've covered both of your pawns. And now the rook takes this one and then this one and you lose. Okay. So because of that, we are obligated to take the knight. But when we do that, we allow the rook to put us in check. And you might say, why does that matter? Well, it matters because now when we move our king, the rook can come all the way down and control the back rank. And this is important because when we try to push our pawn like before, both of them are still covered. The rook is exactly where it needs to be to stop both queens. So that's kind of a problem for us. And so we can try to bring our king up, but black has this move rook to f8 check. We can try to come over here, but they simply slide their king over. And yes, we can go here trying to push this forward, but it doesn't work. And here's an example of why. Rook to a8. We can play g7, but then there's king to f7, and they're still controlling that square. We can't actually get a queen, and we don't really have anything good to do. We can go here, but black simply, I guess, just takes the pawn is probably the easiest thing. We can go here, but again, they stop us. We never really get a chance to get the queen. Okay, so you can see how that's what black is trying to do. Going back to the original position here, if we push the wrong pawn, black's going to go for this knight check and then check with the rook and bring the rook down, and we saw what happens. So you might be asking yourself, well, what's the difference if we play g7? Can't black do the same thing except on the other side with knight to c4 check? And it kind of looks like it, right? We take the knight, they put us in check, we come up, the rook comes down. What's the difference? Before I tell you the answer, if you'd like to pause, try to figure out the significance or the significant difference between this position and the previous one that I showed you. If you had a chance to look at that, the reason that it's not the same is with this. King to b6. Remember what black had to play before. Rook to b8 check. We came up. They brought the king over to defend. And last time we didn't have any good moves. But now we do. It's a sacrifice that ultimately leads to a stalemate. See, because this pawn is on the edge of the board, our king is stalemated. In the previous position, there was no stalemate trick. Our king would have been able to, run in that direction further off the board here. Sorry, I can't draw the arrow there, but you get the idea, right? Like if we go back, actually, I'll show you to this one, a7, check, takes, check, king here, rook comes down, king comes up, check, king here. Here, we can't do this and get a stalemate because look at our king. It just runs over here. You can see the difference. That's why the only way to draw the position was the move g7. Now, unfortunately for Bobby Fischerman, the Caterpillar saw all of this and selected the correct move and saw all of the variations and successfully solved all 3 of Bobby Fischerman's puzzles. He won the tournament, went to the award ceremony, and received his ticket. The ticket was a trip to the Dragon's Lair to choose his piece of treasure. And as he was walking away, Bobby Fischerman turned to congratulate him, and as he did, a cell phone fell out of the Caterpillar's pocket and onto the ground. Now, there was a strict no electronic devices policy at this tournament, and Bobby Fischerman was shocked. And when the Caterpillar noticed that he had dropped the cell phone, he picked it up quickly, still having the ticket in his hand, the prize from the tournament, and he took off into the woods. Bobby Fischerman stood there in shock and didn't know what to do next. That's where we'll pick up our story next time. please be sure to leave a comment if you have an idea of what you think Bobby Fischerman should do next. As always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.